Hey Gray.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Ready to the question?
I am.
The first question was, can you enlighten us about the law school in America?
Yeah, sure. So, first, you have to forget everything that you know about the Indonesian legal system and legal education, because it's very different in America. So I'm going to quickly walk you through this. So, to start off with, just like in Indonesia, everybody goes to kindergarten and they go to school until they're about 18. They go through 12th grade. And then, just like in Indonesia, there's a segment of the population that goes to college, undergrad, and they go for 4 years. But this is where it's different. In Indonesia, one of the things that you can study is law, right? In America, that's not true. So nobody in America goes to college or undergrad when they're 18 to 22. No one studies law at that time. They can study other things. They can study things that relate to the law. So like I studied political science and I studied history. And so I learned some things about the law, but I never was trained as a lawyer in undergrad. But if you want to do that, you've got to go to something that we all call law school, which is different, right? So you go to law school to earn what we call a JD, right? And we're going to talk more about that, I think, a little bit later. But a JD is what you have to practice law. Law school in America is 3 years. You have to go to undergrad, so that's 4 years, and then you've got to finish law school, which is another 3. It's very expensive. It's kind of hard to get into. It's very rewarding, but it's also extremely difficult. It is also not a PhD. So I talked to some Indonesians while I've been here, and they asked me, what's it like, legal education in America? And this is a point of confusion sometimes. So it is where I'm not getting a PhD in law, I'm getting a JD in law, which is a little bit different, I think, than in America. One other thing that you got to understand. So there's an undergrad, then there's law school, and there's a PhD. But there's also what we would call a master's. No one gets a master's in law. Nobody who is a lawyer in America has a master's in law. You can get a master's in other things that may help you do law. You can get a master's in business, which may help you work in a firm, or you can get a master's in public administration if you want to work for the government. You can imagine all the different examples. But if you want to practice law, you got to go to law school for 3 years and earn a JD.
Okay, that's great. I think because you have already mentioned about the Juris Doctor,
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the specific process of the Juris Doctor, and then how the prospect after you got the Juris Doctor?
Sure. So a JD, as I've said, stands for a Juris Doctorate. It's Latin. We don't really call it a Juris Doctorate, we just call it a JD. Like I said, 3 years of school, and you have earned a Juris Doctorate if you pass all your classes and you have enough credits to graduate, okay? There's still other things that you still have to do if you want to actually practice law, but a JD is what you earn when you go to law school, and you definitely cannot practice law without one. If you want to practice law, you usually graduate with a JD, and then you go and take what's called the bar exam. It's a test that is not given in law school. It is given by the state that you want to work in. It's basically a license to practice law. The same as a doctor needs a license, or even in America, you need a cosmetic license to cut hair. In America, a lawyer needs that as well. So, you take that exam, and if you've done well in law school and you study for it, most people pass. But if you don't, you can keep taking it until you do. Once you've passed it, you then have to actually find a job, which is the next part of your question, right? Which is, what are your prospects? Usually pretty good, but it depends on the kind of law that you want to do. So if you're fine with working in the private sector, and just working for a law firm, then you'll probably find a job. It might not be at a law firm that pays you a whole lot. It may not be at a law firm that's located in the city that you want to live in, but you will have a job. Other people want to use their law degree to work for the government, and that can look like different things. Those jobs are usually harder to get unless you're wanting to be what's called a public defender, which we can also talk more about if you have questions about that. But private sector, if you're fine with working kind of anywhere in the country and doing any kind of law, and you feel like you can learn as you go, then great, you'll be okay. The only other thing that you can do with your, well, there's two things you can do with your law degree besides that. You don't actually have to practice law. So there is a need for people who understand the law to advise organizations on what a lawyer would expect them to know, but they are not themselves practicing law. A lot of journalists and other writers have a law degree, and it's really helpful to them because law school really teaches you how to write quickly and think fast, and some writing, you need an understanding of the law to do it well. But again, you're not actually having to practice law when you do that. The last sort of category that you can practice law in is what we would call the nonprofit sector. Or sometimes this looks like an NGO, sometimes it just looks like charitable work, but there are lots of organizations that do work for people or for populations that maybe can't afford it themselves, or that need advocates, or who are organizing for political change or around an issue. And all of those organizations usually wind up in court at some point, either because they've done something wrong or because what they're challenging is a law. So a lot of the great civil rights cases in American history and in world history have been done by organizations who want to challenge a law that they think is unfair. And of course, if you want to do that, you need lawyers. Not that many people wind up working in this, but there are jobs available. It's really good work. Unfortunately, it often doesn't pay a lot until later in life when you do really, really well. So, depending on your needs, depending on how much debt you had to go into, and depending on what kind of law you want to actually do, yes, your prospects for getting a job are good. It just might not always be the job that you want or expect, but I hope, and I'm told, I have not finished law school yet, that most people wind up feeling pretty good about the job that they're in, even if it's not the job that they originally thought they wanted.
That's great, amazing. So let's get into the job question.
Okay, yeah.
Law graduated in America. So can you tell us about how the graduate got work? Like, I mean, what kind of work that most of law graduated were into the job?
Yeah.
In America?
Yeah. So I don't want to confuse people, but the kind of categories that I just said, they fit well into what I'm about to explain. So usually you're either what we would call a practicing attorney or just a practicing lawyer, and there's somebody who is reviewing legal documents for clients. Maybe it's because they want to sell their home, maybe it's because they got involved in a traffic accident and they need representation. These are, think of them as general lawyers, right? They usually work for a law firm of some kind. Maybe it's a small firm, maybe it's a giant one, but they handle all different kinds of cases from all different parts of law. Land law, property rights, criminal cases, civil infractions, any number of things. As they get better at it, they usually end up working on the cases that they actually want to take. But when you're fresh out, if you're just a practicing attorney, that is where most people who practice law in America, that's where they end up. They're usually not going to court. Most of the time, they're trying to keep people out of court, or they're working with other lawyers who end up trying to do what we would call settling. They don't want the case to go forward because they want to work out a deal with the other person so that they can avoid going to court. However, of course, plenty of cases do wind up in court, and these are the kinds of lawyers usually who are in court and they're arguing in front of a judge, and there's another attorney on the other side, and this is what you would see in a lot of Hollywood movies, right? Is two attorneys, maybe multiple attorneys on each side, arguing it out before a court, before a judge. Maybe there's a jury there. We can talk about that. But that is actually kind of rare. Most cases don't get that far. But if you're an attorney in America, that is the kind of stuff that you're usually at least trained to do. And you may not end up doing a whole lot, but that's what you end up doing. So that's kind of one big thing that they can do. Then there's if you want to work for the government, okay? So in America, everyone, this is true in Indonesia, but everyone is guaranteed the right to an attorney if they are in a criminal case, right? If they've done something criminal, which means the government is coming after them. So not you and me fighting each other, but the government is coming after me. Maybe I'm accused of murder, let's say, which would not be good, and I've never done it, but let's say I'm accused of murder. So I get to have an attorney if I want it. That attorney is called a public defender if the government gives me one, okay? Public defenders are awesome people, okay? We don't have enough of them in America, and they are overworked, but they are the people who make sure that our justice system is at least giving everybody a fighting chance. A lot of American law students, I should say, don't want to go into this line of work. It's often underpaid, it's often really difficult, and because of the way our system is set up, you're losing most cases. It's not because you're a bad lawyer, it's because what you're really doing is you're trying to make sure that your client gets a fair hearing in court and doesn't get over-punished for something that they may have done, okay? So you can be a public defender, you can be a regular practicing attorney, you can also be a prosecutor, right? So a prosecutor is like the opposite of a public defender. They also are working for the government, but they're trying to catch the criminal in what they think they've done, okay? Those are often a little harder those jobs are harder to get, but they're public servants, they have a ton to do, they're usually underpaid, and they are government employees. The last thing if you want to do law for the government is you can just be an attorney for the government who usually doesn't go into the courtroom. They're usually making sure that people who work for the government are following the law. So let's say they work in the Department of Defense. They've got to know a lot about the different kinds of rules and laws that govern that department, right? And they are not there to catch people. They're there to make sure that if you and me work for the Department of Defense, that we're following the law. So all the different little offices in the government have to have lawyers and a staff of attorneys. So those jobs are they're hard to get usually, and they're usually they're not overworked. Not because they don't do enough work, but they have work-life balance is usually pretty good. So those jobs are usually really good. I would love to be one. And then I guess the last thing would be, and I've already mentioned it before, but if you work you don't use your law degree to do legal work, but you use your law degree to advise people in other capacities. So it always helps to have someone who understands the law, but maybe you've not hired them as your attorney. You've just hired them as someone who knows the legal field, and those people are employed in all different kinds of industries. They could be in finance, they could be in journalism, as I've already mentioned, could be in business. All of these people are very valuable. So That is certainly not all the different positions that you can have, but you can work for a firm, you can work for the government, or you can work for a different kind of organization, and then you can use your law degree in different ways in each of those environments.
That's awesome. So the next question. As we know that United States is a federal state, which is consists of many states in America. So
That's right.
can you enlighten us about how the law school in the United States, in every state?
Yeah, so it's not equal. Some states don't even have a law school, but most do. However, in America, they rank all the law schools against one another, starting at the top, number one, all the way down, well into like the 200s. So in America, we have a term called T14, or top 14, okay? If you get into a T14 school, which is like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, those schools are almost all equal. They're like the best, and if you get into there, you're basically gonna do fine in life. Then after that, if you can go top 50, you're also still looking pretty good. I'll let you in on a secret. William and Mary, my college, was ranked 30, so I'm somewhere right in the middle of the pack in terms of like being one of the top schools. But past that, that is where most people go to school, right? Most people don't go to a top 50 law school, and they do a lot of good work. In fact, they do most of the work that we actually need lawyers to do. So I'm not here to tell you that any school is not worth going to, but in America, we rank them, of course, and those schools that are considered to be in the top 50 are not evenly distributed, okay? So the T14 schools, a lot of them are concentrated in the northeastern part of the country. A couple are further west, but there's a lot of concern in America about access to good legal education because it's not equally distributed. I think there's a lot that's been done to fix this, but we're still not there by any means, and it's going to be interesting in our lifetimes to see how legal education changes in America and in the world as both more countries enter the education system of like the global planet, and how online learning continues to change things, right? So if you live in a state in America that doesn't have a great law school and you don't want to leave that state, maybe you can just be an online student at one of those T14 schools that I mentioned. I think there's problems with that, but I think you're definitely going to see a lot of change.
Okay, so great. Next question. You know that there's a lot of Indonesian students that wanted to study abroad in US, especially law school in United States. So if the foreigners like us, Indonesia especially, wanted to study abroad law school in America, what advice can you give to us?
Well, let me start with explaining what you have to do to go to law school in America in the first place. So I mentioned that you have to have an undergraduate degree. That's true. However, there's still an application process to even be admitted into law school, the same as there are in any country. So in America, you have to take what's called the LSAT, which is the Law School Admissions Test. It's pretty tough. It's different than any test that I have ever taken and that most people will ever take. People study for it for months. It's not fun, but that gives you a score, and you send that score to the schools that you want to go to. You also usually have to write a personal statement and a couple other writing samples, and you've got to give them your undergraduate transcripts or your grades. There are other requirements as well. There's usually a fee to apply, like a $50 fee in some cases. Some schools will waive those fees depending on your financial background or other needs. I don't know what exactly it is for international students, but I do know that most schools' admissions offices tend to be pretty lenient about granting an exemption if price is going to be something that prevents you from applying to the school at all. So, That's what you got to have. So if you're an international student, you need to have gone to university of some kind, and you need to have a degree from that university. All right. You need to have a certain level of grades. So in America, you're looking at needing, a 3.0 on our 4-point scale, so 75% or higher is usually the cutoff. Some schools will still let you in. If you are really, really dedicated to going to law school, then you should still try. But you should just know that law school is competitive to get into. You'll need to take the LSAT, like I said. That is all online. If you Google LSAT, you'll find the website. You'll be able to look at some practice exams and see the dates that they offer that. You also have to pay money to take the LSAT. It's not cheap, and you can't take it over and over and over again quickly. So you need to prepare for it. You need to practice if you want to get in. Most Americans don't practice enough for it. Frankly, I didn't even practice enough for it. But you've got to practice some if you want a score that it can actually get you into law school. And then the last thing, and this is I don't know if this is fair or not, but you are going to need to have a pretty good English to be able to compete in law school. Now, that shouldn't scare you off. I know plenty of international students who study even with me, and their English is not perfect, and that's okay. Most of what you're doing in law school is reading and writing, but you, of course, need to be able to understand what the professor is saying. And the professor is usually not going to slow down. They're usually going to be talking about really big legal concepts that can be challenging for someone who doesn't speak the native language. The same way it's been very challenging for me to understand a lot about the Indonesian constitution and the Indonesian legal system. So there are usually people who are there to help you and advise you if you're an international student, but I imagine it would be very difficult if your English is not very strong. Sometimes you have to take a test that proves that your English is at a certain level. Not all schools require that, and they will tell you on their website what they require of you if you're an international student. The last thing I would say about this is you don't have to go to law school in America for 3 years to go to law school in America. In fact, you probably shouldn't unless you want to practice law in America, right? Because you're going to learn about American law, and it's different than most countries. It's definitely very different than Indonesian law. So you can go and do a semester, sometimes a year, and do what we would call an LLM. All right. Now this abbreviation, this title, gets used differently in Indonesia. So don't define it the way that Indonesians use it for a second. An LLM is in America is a Master's of Law, and it is a short period of study that specializes you on a certain type of law. So let's say that you're an Indonesian and you want to practice international business, right? You might want to get an LLM in American business law, because of course, if you want to do international business, there's a good chance that you're going to be working with American companies, working with American attorneys in transactions, right? You can go to America and you can learn just that, okay? You don't have to relearn criminal law and civil procedure and all those basic level classes that I just got done with. And you probably don't want to, because it's not worth it to you. The same would be true if you want to do international criminal law, or if you want to do environmental work, and you're really interested in the way America has handled their environmental regulations, then that is a great opportunity, right? To go to a different country and learn about the way that they're doing it. That will help you. But I would caution you, if you want to do if you want to study law in America, don't do 3 whole years unless you plan on moving to America and staying and practicing American law. But an LLM is a great opportunity. I know my college has many LLM students. They really contribute in class and they contribute to the community. And from my experience talking to them, I think that they're getting a lot out of their experience as well.
Awesome. So we're on the last question.
Okay, great.
Is there something that you want to say to us international law students, like advice or something like that? So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think I know that the systems are different in Indonesia. So I believe I am correct in saying that most of you, if you're currently a law student, you're either 18, 19, 20, 21, or 22. I'm 28, and I just finished my first year of law school. Most Americans are starting law school. They're starting where you are when they're 22. And I'm here to tell you there is a difference between being your age and studying what you're learning and being my age and studying what I'm learning. And I know that there's a lot in life right now that can be like really overwhelming. You're trying to figure out, relationships. You're trying to figure out where you want to be after you're done with college. And on top of that, you're learning a really difficult subject. So I would just say things get better with a little bit of age. And if you can, take it slow, work as much as you can, like outside of school. It will really help you see what in America we would call it the real world, but it will really help you see what life outside of a classroom is like. That has helped me a lot in working in law and studying law, is knowing that there's more to life than just law school. And a lot of my friends who went to law school when they were much younger, it's hard to remember that, because it's so difficult. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't take some time for myself before going to law school. The other thing that I would say is actually do all of the reading. And I mean like all of it. And here's why. In law, in my experience, it is not necessarily about what you know, it's about how much you can handle. You are not learning how to run a race. You are building up the skills and the muscle to be able to run the race the longest. And the only way to do that is to put yourself through as much content as you can. Law school is going to throw a lot of things for you to do, and you've just got to step up and you got to keep going with it. I am someone who really values understanding everything that I interact with. When I read something or I work on a project, I want to know that I've got the answers right. And one thing that I've really learned through law school is that doesn't always really happen. What ends up mattering more is that you are able to get through the project that you're working on, and someone else is probably going to know something that you don't, and you're just going to have to accept the fact that you couldn't get all the answers. And so like I said, the only way that you can really train for that is by putting yourself through all of the reading and all of the work now when you're a student, and it doesn't matter as much, so that you later on you can actually get the job done. So I've spent the last about 2.5 months working with PUSaKO here at Untitled University, and I've had a really good time doing it. And I think it makes me think about my first year in law school. In American law schools, the first year is very independent. You're not usually working with too many groups, and you don't have a lot of ability to form a community. If you do, you're making those relationships individually, but there's a little less focus on a group like PUSaKO. And so the first thing that I really take away from my time with PUSaKO is I think it's really, really wonderful that the organization gives young students a place to find other people who are interested in the kind of law that they want to do. In PUSaKO's case, of course, that's constitutional law, that's focused on anti-corruption, making government better, which is what I'm most interested in as well. And so I think if you're going to come to law school and you're going to be here at Andalas, an organization like PUSaKO is wonderful for you. Second, and more about PUSaKO itself, is PUSaKO does a lot of really cool work. There's a constitutional court justice that has a good relationship with PUSaKO. You've got a team of people who are in business and in the field of law that are going to work with you and be a mentor and a friend, and that is really, really, really invaluable in law. And you've got an opportunity to think about how what you're learning can be used in the real world. PUSaKO is really wonderful in that way. And I guess lastly, I'm sitting here in the PUSaKO office, and they've got a lot of really good resources. So I think definitely if you're shopping around and you're looking at organizations that you might want to join while you're here at Andalas, PUSaKO would be a really good pick for you. And that's just coming from me as somebody who's not even a student at Andalas. They've really taken me in and they've given me a great experience, and so I hope that you'll consider PUSaKO when you're looking around.
Okay, so that's all for now. Thank you, Gray, for your time, and see you next time.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck to you. You're going to make a really important decision whether you decide to go to law school or not. But if you do, I think it's really rewarding, and you'll have a really good career ahead of you, but you got to put the work in. Thank you.
Okay.